Right now, we're going to move on with a look through this morning's newspapers. Hot off the presses, Flo Villamino has been looking through them for us. Hi there. And we're going to start off with the Le Figaro newspaper and their take on that battle for Mosul, which is now into its second day.
That's right. Let's take a look at the front page of Le Figaro. They're talking about at the heart of the battle for Mosul. Now, they sent a journalist embedded with the Kurdish Peshmerga troops that are fighting in the eastern part of the city. Le Figaro is very confident. It says victory is guaranteed. It's just a question of days or weeks. So it will be a beautiful victory, says Le Figaro in its editorial. That's clear. But what's less clear is what's going to come after that victory. We need to make sure that the post-war period doesn't feed future wars. And Le Figaro says, essentially, we need to make sure that Iraqi authorities don't repeat mistakes that they've made in the past and essentially marginalizing certain communities. This, we saw, led to the rise of the Islamic State group in the wake of the Iraqi war. Well, we need to make sure that that history doesn't repeat itself.
And Le Figaro reporting there on a story that pretty much every media outlet around the world, I think, is reporting on. They've also got another story that more or less went unnoticed. It happened last week in China when hundreds of former soldiers staged a demonstration right in the heart of Beijing. That's quite unusual, isn't it?
That's right. Very unusual. There was a media blackout in China, but you can read about it more here in Le Figaro. So these are hundreds of demobilized soldiers from the People's Liberation Army demonstrating in front of the Ministry of Defense. So pretty unheard of. What are they calling for? Well, essentially, they want the government to make good on its promises to help them find jobs and give them benefits. Now, what's interesting is the statistics here. The People's Liberation Army employs 2.3 million people. There are about 6 million veterans in China. Recently, the government said it was cutting 300,000 jobs in the army to focus more on technology. So this is why these veterans are worried about their situation. And they're having a hard time reintegrating society. It's hard for them to find jobs, and that's why they're calling on the government to help them.
Certainly a story we don't hear much about at all, if ever. Let's turn to a story much closer to home here in France. Here at France 24, we're reporting currently from the so-called jungle migrant camp up in Calais, our team up there currently. The government has announced measures to dismantle the camp and relocate the migrants living there. This is while everyone's talking about the unaccompanied minors that have been heading across the channel to the UK.
That's right. It's the final countdown for the jungle. That's what Le Monde says. Le Monde focuses on the timing here. Authorities have exactly 1 week until the morning of October 24th to create new housing and solve this minor problem, as they're calling it. Now, according to Le Monde, these migrants could get a cold reception in certain towns where shelters have been set up. You can read all the details here in Le Monde. Le Monde talks about several incidents, for instance, in Saint-Brévin-les-Pins or Saint-Hilaire-du-Rosier. These are little towns where there have been these welcome centers that have been set up. In these towns, for instance, there were vacation centers that were transformed into these migrant centers, and shots were fired on them. So I think a lot of locals there are uncertain about what this means for them, and migrants as well, as to how their welcome is going to be.
And here in Paris, some people living in one of the poshest parts of the city, we have to say, they're suspicious that what we're told is a homeless people's centre is actually going to be used sort of by stealth to bring in migrants into the French capital. That's
right. It's a really unusual story. You can read all about it here in Le JDD. Now, this is the 16th arrondissement, as you said, one of the poshest neighborhoods in Paris, located in the western part of the city. Now, several residents have been up in arms for months now over this homeless shelter that's set to open its doors. They're convinced it's actually secretly a migrant center. Now, Le JDD reports that the center was actually set on fire yesterday. The fire didn't cause too much damage, and it should open on schedule at the beginning of November.
Mysterious indeed. I mentioned before about those unaccompanied children. There's been so much worry about them, hasn't there, at the jungle? Hundreds thought to be up there. This week, several dozen going across to join family members in the UK. One of the French newspapers has been speaking to some of these teenagers and young people.
That's right. It's a moving story you can read in Le Parisien. You can see they're talking about the first bridge towards the UK. So negotiations with Great Britain have allowed dozens of these unaccompanied refugee teenagers to be reunited with their families. You can see this photo here. This is 16-year-old Harris being reunited with his uncle, who he hadn't seen in 7 years. And so his uncle says, his eyes, I recognized him in his eyes. Now, there will be up to about 200 of these youngsters that were stuck in the jungle, identified by the Red Cross as eligible to go to Britain. It's a big story in France. It's a major story in the UK, of course, but we'll have to get to that in the International Press Review at 9 o'clock.
Okay, we'll wait for that a bit later on. We've just got one final story, also about young people in a way. And I don't know about you, but I always thought Tuesday was a pretty good day to skip school. Flo, it seems that quite a lot of French youngsters are skipping class, but not actually because they're trying to. It's because their classes aren't happening.
That's right, because there aren't enough substitute teachers. You can read more about this on the front page of Le Parisien. Mais où sont passés les profs? Where in the world are the teachers? Now, this is true for all age groups, so lower, middle, and high school. Essentially, absent teachers just aren't replaced. So this might sound like a dream for students who don't have to go to class, but it's a real problem. In fact, some parents of these students have done the math. 4,700 days of class in total have been missed since the beginning of the year. That's a lot of things that aren't being learned during those hours.
I'm sure those children are diligently making up for
doing
that.
their homework at home. I'm sure.
Textbook sales.
So you can see they're focusing on where the teachers are. La Croix, the Catholic paper, is focusing on where the environmentalism has gone. Now, this is because environmental issues seem oddly absent from the pre-presidential election race. We've seen all these debates happening on the right, for instance. Well, it seems like the environment and ecology in general are oddly absent. All the focus, of course, is on the economy and identity politics.
All right, maybe they'll bring it back into perspective. Thanks very much, Flo Villamino, who I'm sure never skipped school.
Never skipped
of course. Never skipped school. All right, that's it from us for this part of the programme. Do stay tuned, though. After the break, we've got more news coming up for you and a special report from our correspondents in China on the apparently disappearing Jewish minority there. Do stay tuned.